Reminiscing on the best moments of the 2024 season. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, October 18th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome in, welcome all. Happy Friday, everybody. Hopefully we can send you off on your weekend with a little bit of a fun, more relaxed show. We're going to take a step back from the analysis and the numbers. We're actually going to start that next week. So these kind of episodes that we're about to do are somewhat hit and miss. Some people really like them. Some people don't care for them at all. But we're just simply going to take a trip down memory lane, and we're just going to talk about the coolest and best in-game moments and a little bit of like off the field, like clinching and whatnot, moments from the 2024 season. This was, without a doubt, one of the most fun seasons of Tigers baseball in my entire life. I'm 26 years old. 2006, I remember very, very well and was a huge fan of. And obviously, that was a magical season and whatnot. That was almost 20 years ago. And I think that this year, after 10 seasons of losing baseball, to finally get back, go on that run, be the talk of the sport, was just there was a sense of magic to it, right? And that's not trying to take away from obviously what happened on the field and take away from the players, rather. But there was a sense of we may never see a run like this again. We may never see something this unlikely ever again. And it made for a laundry list of absolutely incredible moments this season. So we're just going to simply just talk about them. We're just going to talk about some of the coolest moments, take a trip down memory lane from this incredible 2024 season. I actually want to start with game one. Opening day was awesome. It was only a 1-0 victory against a White Sox team that we would later find out is historically awful. And Kopech pitched, and he did really well. But this was Skubal's first start of the year, and he was absolutely dominant off rip, right? For him to, I don't want to say wire to wire the Cy Young Award, but like he got off to a crazy good start and then just never let up. Like he didn't have he got off to a really good start and then he struggled, and then he got off to, a really good finish or whatever. Like he was just really good the entire season and really never let his foot off the gas. I think he was probably the front runner from, again, I don't want to say opening day. That's one game sample size for starting pitcher. That probably wasn't the case, but he was the favorite by like the end of April and really never looked back. And that started with an awesome opening day. The Tigers also have not done super well on opening day lately. Obviously, they had the opening day walk-off from Javi in 2022, but this was that was the home opener, I guess. I don't remember if that was truly opening day or not. Either way, to get off on the right foot, to start off with a win was really cool. And then that kind of steamrolled into or snowballed into a 5-game winning streak to start off the season. They had back-to-back, I think it was, extra inning wins in New York against the Mets. There was somewhat of a feeling of like they just are going to keep finding ways to win. I remember watching their first loss, and in the 9th inning in that final game in New York, being like, all right, like let's see how they find a way to win this one. And that's ridiculous. Like obviously they're not going to go 162-0, but and it was only 5 games. I know that's like a huge overreaction on my part more than anything else, but it was just, that was the feeling that it was, right? They swept Chicago to start off the season, and then back-to-back really close ninth inning, extra inning wins to start off against the Mets, who are still playing baseball. Obviously got off to a slow start, but who ended up being a really good team. It was just, there was a feeling of a lot of optimism at that moment. And I think that those games, there was a couple of really big home runs hit there. Colt Keith got off to a slow start in those first 5 games, had a really big hit in those games as well in New York. You also had Jason Foley pumping like 101. He was the best reliever in baseball for most of the month of April. I don't think he gave up a single run for like the first 3-4 weeks of the season. Right. So going on opening day, reverting back to the opening day conversation, right? You had Skubal going out there, throwing darts, looking dominant. Everyone gets hyped and starts talking about the Cy Young campaign. And then you have Jason Foley coming out of the pen and throwing 101 mile an hour sinkers that are getting swings and misses. And I remember coming on here and being like, well, you know, my comment about not having a closer is going to look really stupid if Jason Foley's pumping 101 all year. Now, obviously he didn't, and he ended with an ERA over 3, but in that moment, it was just really cool to see him. We're like, all right, well, this is kind of wild. And this was the most optimistic that a lot of Tigers fans had been in a while as well. So to get off to that hot start and not play terrible in May, or April rather, they did play kind of terrible at the end of May. To not play horribly in March and April, I think really went a long way to kind of the continued optimism and the hype around the season this year. So that start to the year, the first 5 games were really, really fun. Then a little bit later in the year, we're talking, May, you had Spencer Torkelson hit a huge home run against the Miami Marlins. And I remember now again, hindsight is 2020. I'm just going based off what the feel was, what the vibe was, what the emotions were in that moment. He obviously would end up getting sent down and had a pretty darn disappointing season. But in that moment, everybody looked around in this fan base and went, please let that be the sign that he figured it out. I remember that pitch was a meatball. That was one of the worst pitches, I think, of the 2024 season thrown by anybody, that ball that he hit the homer on. But that was a huge moment. That was a really close game. We were either losing or it was tied, and he hit that homer to take the lead. And I just remember the sigh of relief almost from the fan base of like, all right, he still has the power. He showed some emotion there, let out a scream after hitting it. Like, that was a really, really big moment in the moment. And we all just kind of hoped that was going to be a sign of things to come. Unfortunately, it wasn't for him until he got recalled there in August. But in that moment, it was really cool. And then another one of the I think it was the first walk. Oh no, it wasn't. Well, it might have been the first walk-off of the season. If not, it was definitely one of the first walk-off home run of the season, was Matt Vierling against the Toronto Blue Jays. This game was ridiculous. This was a 14-11 final. Okay. We'll continue talking about that and obviously more right after this. Got to talk to y'all about our friends over at Hims. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have the time to go to a doctor's office and get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside of your door. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their genetics for up to 95% cheaper. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works best for you. So start your free trial and your free online visit today at hims.com/locked on. That's HIMS.com/locked on for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compound products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday, and we'll see what kind of news comes out throughout the weekend. We got some smaller stuff to talk about. Jake Rogers getting nominated for a Gold Glove, Riley Greene getting snubbed, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll see what news comes out, assuming it's not a very big weekend, which I don't anticipate it will be, but those are also kind of like famous last words. We might get the busiest news weekend ever now. We are going to start our player deep dives next week. We're going to go through everybody on the Major League roster, try to get through everybody on the 40-man, but we'll see how much time we have from now until the end of the World Series. Either way, that is what we're going to do for the rest of the postseason. And then once the World Series ends and we start getting actual like dates on, certain players have to be re-signed by certain days and certain contract options have to be picked up and arbitration and et cetera, all that stuff. All of that legally cannot start until after the World Series ends. So from now until the end of the postseason, that is what we will be doing. We're in a crunch for time because the Tigers actually made the postseason. Usually we have all playoffs to do them. So we'll see how many we get through, but we're going to try to get through everybody on the 40-man. And that starts on Monday. And then if there's big news that comes out, obviously we'll just take a day off from doing the deep dives and talk about that. But we'll play it by a day-by-day basis. So today we're talking about the best moments from the 2024 season. Kind of a fun, more relaxed, laid-back Friday episode for you. So Matt Vierling's walk-off homer, that was, until the final month and a half of the season, that was the moment of the season. Right? Like if you take a time machine back to the All-Star break or back to the trade deadline, that moment where he hit that walk-off, that was the coolest moment of the year until that final month and a half stretch happened. And you got a couple of Parker Meadows moments we'll talk about. There was a Dodgers game in July we'll talk about. But that was the pinnacle. That was a huge 3-run walk-off homer by Vierling. And that was a 14-11 final against the Toronto Blue Jays. There were videos about that for like weeks afterwards from the Tigers account. Nobody would stop talking about it, and rightfully so. That was a really, really cool moment as well. Speaking of that Dodgers game, this game might be, I think, my favorite game of the season. This was the Tigers were down 9-4 going into the 9th inning at home against the Dodgers and ended up winning in extra innings. They put up a 5-spot in the 9th, and then in the 10th inning, Gio Urshela, of all people, hits a walk-off home run. My favorite moment of that game specifically, however, was Colt Keith hitting a 2-run homer on a cutter up and in, turning on a cutter up and in, 93, 94 miles an hour. I think it was a ball inside. That pitch was way, way in. Turns on it to the pull side, hits a 2-run homer to tie the ball game and send them into extra innings. There was a lot of moments leading up to that. Malloy, I know, had a really good AB in that game as well. Just was all around. That is, I think, my favorite game of the year in terms of not like off the field. Like obviously my we'll get to it, but like my favorite moment was probably clinching at home, right? Clinching a playoff berth at home was pretty darn cool. Winning a playoff game at home was pretty darn cool. But in terms of just the baseball side of it purely, and not any of the off the field, not any of the emotion that comes with clinching and whatnot, just purely from a baseball game perspective, I think that's probably my favorite game of the year. Still put up 4 runs in 8 innings. Didn't have very good pitching, obviously, but like the offense was showing up really all game and then exploded through. The prized rookie comes through and hits the big home run and then the walk-off. I don't know, that against the Dodgers, no less, at home. So many factors. That was a really, really cool moment. Akil Baddoo also hit a walk-off around that time, and I think that moment's just going to stand out to me because I love that man. I adore Akil Baddoo. I am rooting for him wherever he ends up. I have a feeling that he is probably not going to make it through the winter with the Detroit Tigers. I think in a lot of, probably myself included. So I'll prep all of the Akil Baddoo fans out there for this, but I would imagine most writers and people that cover the team when they do mock trades are going to have Akil Baddoo being a part of almost all of them. Like he struggled this year. We talked about it yesterday, but him having that moment of, you know what, it was in the minor leagues for a majority of this season, got called up, hit a walk-off, that double deep into the outfield was just, I'll remember that. And like, obviously I'm going to remember, the grand slam his rookie year and the walk-off in the first week of the season and whatnot. Like I'm going to remember a lot of the like peak Akil Baddoo moments, but that one is going to always hold in my memory bank as well. Just, if that was the last big moment of his Tigers career, like what a fun ride it was for a Rule 5 pick. We'll save that conversation for if and when an Akil Baddoo decision is made this winter. He is still on the team right now, still on the 40-man right now, obviously. But I don't know that if that ends up being the last big moment of his Tigers career, what a fun ride it was. Wenceel Perez also had an incredible moment. This was in May against Arizona. And I was at Nolan Bianchi's wedding. Nolan was the original host, the OG first ever host of Locked On Red Wings, and is the reason why. So if you don't like me, blame Nolan. The reason that Locked On eventually reached out to me, and him and I hosted Locked On Red Wings together for about a year and a half before Brian took over for Nolan. So I was at Nolan Bianchi's wedding, and the ceremony happens and we go to the reception, the dinner happens, the first dance, everything, whatever. And then I am at a table with all of the other like sports media personalities or journalists or beat writers in the city, right? That are all friends with Nolan, who obviously writes for the Detroit News and covers the lines for the Detroit News as well. And we are all keeping tabs on this game, and it's 2-0 going into the 7th, and the Tigers have just seemed like they've rolled over, whatever. They put up a 6 spot in the top of the 7th inning in Arizona and come back and end up winning like 8-3. And I remember the talk of the table was there's a little bit of magic in the air, right? Like they just keep. Wenceel Perez was on nobody's radar and came through and had this huge bases clearing, bases loaded triple in that game to really, like, he came up when it was 2-2 bases loaded and was easily the biggest swing of the game to not single-handedly, but like obviously was probably the biggest moment or the biggest reason as to why they ended up winning that game. And I just remember everybody at Nolan's wedding, Nolan included, was talking about the Wenceel Perez big hit and about the Tigers that were trending in the right direction and got a big win in Arizona. So that was a really cool moment that I'll always remember. Riley Greene and Tarik Skubal both making the All-Star game. I think, we haven't had a true 2 players. Obviously, the Miggy thing, that he wasn't voted in. That was like the commissioner doing him and Albert Pujols a solid. Like that wasn't, he didn't deserve to be an All-Star that year. But as far as play on the field goes, that season, okay, I have to put a bunch of caveats on so people don't get mad at me. I think it's awesome that he did it. No ill will. This was the first time that 2 players legitimately got like, hey, 2 Tigers deserve to be All-Stars in a very, very long time. And so it was just cool to both see them there, both see them play as well. Tarik Skubal should have started. I'm still salty about it. Corbin Burns, what a ridiculous decision. But at the end of the day, he still got in the game, and we still got to see both of them play, which was really cool. Cater Montero, complete game shutout. I think this is one of the more underrated moments of the season. This is a guy who had struggled a little bit when he first got called up, and some people were questioning why he was the decision. Why are we calling up Montero? Why is it not, Matt Manning? Why is it not this person, X, Y, and Z? And for him to go out there and just have that moment, it was against an awful opponent. Who cares? It's Major League Baseball, and he had a Maddox. He had less than 100 pitches and had a complete game shutout, and that was just a really, really awesome moment that I think will definitely stand out as one of the biggest moments of the 2024 season and one of the biggest accomplishments individually by any player on this roster this year, to be completely honest. Okay, let's get into the really big moments here. Let's get into this final month and a half of the season and all of the incredible, crazy, wild moments that came from this amazing run. We will do that right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money on sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everybody. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. They have so many great offers as well. They have the injury insurance policy, which I think is awesome. If a player gets hurt in the first half of a game and doesn't return, your play stays intact. And you can now win up to 100 times your money as well with as little as 4 correct picks. And right now, if you download the app and use code LOCKEDONMLB, you get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On MLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, everybody, welcome back. Your third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So we have made it through a lot of the first half of the season, the first, up until the trade deadline, I guess, of the season. We talked Kader Montero. That happened a little bit later, but now we get to the electric factory that was that final month and a half of the year. I want to start off by just having a whole portion of this show dedicated to all the crazy things Parker Meadows specifically did. You had the robbed home run in Seattle, one of the coolest moments of the season. You had the walk-off in the Little League Classic, Parker Meadows, one of the coolest moments of the season. And then obviously what is arguably the biggest moment, regular season moment, of the season for the Detroit Tigers was the opposite field grand slam in San Diego to win the game. I think this is like very nerdy of me and not very emotional of me, but the coolest part of that moment to me is that it was a fastball up and away. We talked about ad nauseum this year how he had struggled with spin low and in, and that kind of rhymed, spin low and in, and fastballs up and away in the strike zone. He had a huge hole in his swing where fastballs up and away, he was consistently swinging and missing. And for him to take a fastball up and away in a high leverage count, in a high leverage situation to the opposite field for a home run is just like the coolest thing ever in my brain. So Parker Meadows single-handedly responsible for, I don't know about the 3 biggest, but you could make an argument the 3 biggest. I don't know if it's a winning argument, but you could make an argument that 3 of the coolest moments of the season all came from Parker Meadows. And if you want to talk 2023, I think the coolest moment of that season was his walk-off against the Astros in the regular season for his first Major League home run. This dude is the moment. He lives for the moment, and he had plenty of them this season. Another moment that I think is awesome was Jackson Jobe's Major League debut. I was at this game, and there was a ton of people there. The Tigers are streaking. They're trying to make a playoff push, and he gets a standing ovation. Everybody's chanting, "We want Jobe" at one point in the 8th inning. And for him to come out there and get the final 3 outs, right? Just end a ball game so we can truly have like his moment at the end there, I think was just awesome. Everybody was on their feet the entire 9th inning, a lot of phones out wanting to record it. This is just such an incredible fan base. I love Tigers fans so much. They're so smart and knowledgeable and know the ins and outs of the team. And for, Jackson Jobe to be a guy that had never pitched in the majors before, wasn't like a number 1 overall pick. He was obviously a top 5 pick, was a first round pick, but maybe didn't have the name recognition of a Spencer Torkelson or Casey Mize, because those are 1-1s, right? And for him to just get that reception, I think was one of the coolest moments of the year. Another thing I've written down here, this is kind of cheating, but like any Tarik Skubal start, like I don't want to just leave him off of this. I know we talked about him on opening day. Every time that dude took the bump, you thought something cool might happen. And a lot of times something cool did happen. And so just having a pitcher like that again, that feeling is something that, while it stretched over 31 starts, is not including the postseason where you have 3 more, is something that we have not felt since Verlander left. Where it's just like, you know what? When this dude takes the bump, A, you have a really darn good chance to win this ball game, and B, something amazing could happen today. And so I know it's cheating to pick 31 different moments there, and he didn't go undefeated or anything, but like every single time he took the bump, you just had a different feeling than when anybody else took the mound for this team this year. And those are moments that I will not forget. Jim Leyland Day. A lot of people point to that and say that it was the start of the turnaround for the Detroit Tigers, which anytime Skipper he's such a dog. I just love Jim Leyland, and he's the manager of my childhood. I know people had plenty of frustrations with how he kind of how he managed, really, especially toward the end of his career there, but he's such an integral part of this city. He's such a big part of the culture of the Detroit Tigers over the last 20 years. And, I think the moment that perfectly epitomizes Leyland, even if you love him, you hate him, whatever, all he cared about was the win that day, right? He had his moment. He got honored on the field. He got the standing ovation. He leaned over the dugout and said, "Go get an effing win." And they did. And then they got a lot more. And I think AJ is really cool for, anytime a moment like that happens, a ceremony for a player or a manager like that, he makes all the players watch from the dugout. You're going to go watch greatness. You're going to go watch what these fans appreciate. You're going to go see what winning culture can bring this city. I really appreciate that about both of those guys. All of the major league debuts, also kind of cheating, but also really, really cool. With one of the perks of having such a young roster is all of the opportunity that it created, which means all of the major league debuts that it created. I know we talked about Job specifically, but like Colt Keith, major league debut was opening day this year. So seeing him, the guy who was extended before playing a major league game, obviously that was a really big moment. But you had so many pitchers, so many hitters, especially down the stretch there. Finally seeing Malloy, finally seeing Jace Young, Wenceel Perez, like the list goes on and on. Major league debuts are sacred to me. They're one of the coolest moments in sports, and seeing, the family there and whatnot, it was just really cool to see so many happen for the Tigers this season. Now let's get into the big ones. I think clinching a playoff berth at home on the 6th game of a 6-game winning streak, it was just awesome. They were streaking hard. They couldn't lose. They swept the Royals. They were beating a lot of really good teams. They were beating Baltimore, and to go home and in front of a sellout crowd have that moment where we get to celebrate a 10-year playoff drought ending in Comerica Park in front of 44,000 fans was just the coolest thing ever. 6-game winning streak. You knew they wanted it. They were playing for something every day. They lost the next 2 because of hangovers. Who cares? That was undoubtedly one of the coolest moments of the regular season, if not just straight up the coolest moment from the regular season. I cried that night. I know I share that sentiment with a lot of people. That was a very, very emotional evening, and was a nice reminder that it's not just going to be doom and gloom forever. They're not just going to lose and be awful forever. You're going to have these really, really awesome moments in the postseason. Andy Ibanez coming through clutch against the Houston Astros. That was where it really felt like the rest of the national media was like, this is the team of destiny. The Tigers are the magical team of destiny that everybody's going to talk about. And it was just really cool to be that team, you know, after 10 years of being awful, just having it be, you know, it's the Tigers' turn for a little bit to be at the forefront of the news cycle and whatnot was really awesome. Andy Ibanez, bases clearing, double, triple, did he end up on third base? I don't even remember. I was screaming and running around my apartment. It was just super cool, man. And Andy Ibanez has brought a lot of those moments against lefties over the last 2 years. Having that in the biggest moment when some people were like, oh, like Andy Ibanez kind of struggled down the stretch and AJ just sticking to his guns and going, and you know, the stats that came out of it, right? The entire Tigers wild card roster made less money than Josh Hader. Like having it go up against one of the best closers of a generation, one of the highest paid relief pitchers of all time. Just the cherry on top. And then the biggest home run of the season, without a doubt. And I think in most people's mind, probably the biggest moment of the season. Still have, I bought the newspaper from that day. Late blast, even series. Had to support the Detroit News, obviously my employer for those who don't know. But Kerry Carpenter hitting that home run against Emmanuel Clase. Clase is giving up 5 runs, period, 5 runs, earned runs all season. Kerry Carpenter works the count, takes him deep, wins game 3 or game 2. It was just so awesome. And that is, I think, if you're looking for one specific moment that was the best single at-bat or play of the season for the Tigers, it's hard to argue that it's not that one, man. That was a magical moment that I know a lot of people felt a lot of emotions for as well. We'll end on this one. I think my favorite game of the season, playoffs included, was winning a playoff game in Comerica. Obviously, we know how the next 2 games played out. They dropped the next 2. They blew it. They objectively blew it. We've already talked about that earlier in the week. We don't have to reopen that bag of worms here. But in that moment, you had everything. You were up 2-1 with a game at home still left, a potential clincher at home, and then Skubal in game 5 if it didn't work out. You had a series lead in the ALDS, and you won a playoff game at Comerica Park. Again, broken record for the first time in 10 years. For the first time in 11 years, actually. They got swept in 2014, yeah? So just that moment, winning a playoff game in front of a Comerica Park record attendance, that is a feeling that I will not forget probably ever. And like, I hope that isn't the biggest moment of my life as far as Tigers baseball goes. I hope, you know, where I have never seen the Tigers win a World Series. I pray every day that eventually comes our way and comes this fan base's way, and that's a moment I can experience with myself and my family. I don't want that to be like the coolest moment ever. I don't even think it is, right? Like I watched Maglio when I was 8 or 9 years old with my mom, and I remember bawling my eyes out when Maglio hit the homer, right? Like the final out, Phil Koch pounding his glove on the mound, and after Prince Fielder catches the pop up to send the Tigers to the World Series. You have Max Scherzer coming out of the bullpen against the Oakland A's and being the safety valve with the bases loaded, and the Tigers eventually beating the A's yet again, as they always did back then in the playoffs. Like there are so many moments that are bigger than that one. But in my adult life, I turned 18 in 2016. In my entire adult life, they've been terrible. And so to finally have a moment as an adult where I'm in my own apartment, like living my life, and to see the Tigers win a playoff. You know, I live in downtown Detroit. Like to see them right around the corner, just to be in the city for that moment to happen, man, was just incredible. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday as we start our deep dives, get a little more in-depth, not as surface level, you know, a little deeper in terms of the analysis here. appreciate y'all for tuning in. Again, these episodes are kind of hit or miss. Like I almost feel like this is kind of just listing off things that happen. Maybe that's not good radio. It's not entertaining, but I try to highlight the best moments of the season at the end of every year. We'll get to our regularly scheduled programming here on Monday. Okay. Appreciate you all. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. And I'll catch y'all then, baby. Go Tigers.